Hi, Elena. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Brown, and as Elena says, I work for Fife Council, but I'm also seconded to all of the RSLs that are under the Fife Housing Partnership, getting everybody working together. Could I have the next slide, please? So I'd like to give you a small introduction about the project, what we're currently working on, the progress that we've had in the last 2.5 years where I've been project manager, the challenges that we've experienced, and what our next steps are going forward. Have the next slide, please. The reason that my job came about was due to a publication called Change, Justice and Fairness. And this was a document that came out and explained in 2017, and it was regarding how people suffering domestic abuse were treated in housing in Fife, not just Fife Council, but through all of the RSLs. It was work that was done through Scottish Women's Aid and other agencies together who brought together a working plan. The research that came about was very derogatory, I would say, and actually made us open our eyes and realizing that, you know, we needed to change the way we worked and improve the way we worked from a housing aspect. So together we developed a structure and we looked at three main areas. So we looked at our housing options and our service delivery. We looked at legal issues and how to work with perpetrators. And we looked at the staff and the training development that our staff felt they may need or where they may feel they were lacking. Within these groups, we worked with service users, we worked with staff members, we worked with Women's Aid, we worked with Fife Law Centre, and we had agents from RSLs also coming along to the groups. Every time that we mentioned anything at a group that we felt was going to be worthwhile changing, it was always taken back to our service users group. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see our structure. So from our structure, you could see that we've got a project board. The project board is very much made up of heads of service and councillors. And then we have a management group board. The management group board is made up of lead officers from all different parts of the council and the RSLs. But the very important group on the right hand side, sorry, is the service users focus group. And this group or were going through the experience of domestic abuse. And I had the privilege of meeting up with these ladies at Fife Women's Aid on several occasions, and we would talk about things that were brought up in our training groups and our tasking groups, and we would ask these ladies if they felt if this was put in place into practice, would this have benefited them, or do they think it would benefit them in the future? And this was really good to get their feedback on this, because it's from a housing perspective thinking, yes, we know what we're doing, but if we've not actually been in that woman's shoes, how can I know what's best for that lady? And that's what we wanted to do. We want to make sure that any changes that we were making were going to benefit anybody who was going through domestic abuse or who was fleeing domestic abuse and who was coming into housing. So our three strands were training, organisation. This was for all staff groups within housing. Also within our building services, we made toolbox talks because we looked at who were the people who were going out to the properties, who was likely to see anything that was going on in our properties. So we put together toolbox talks for customer service, building services, and we did training for all of our staff, frontline staff and housing staff. We worked alongside Fife Violence Against Women Partnership training, and we did an introduction to domestic abuse for all staff. This was made mandatory by housing, and all of the housing staff had to do this. We have also now completed a 2-year refresher course just to keep people in light of changes and what may have happened. We also worked closely with Shelter Scotland at looking at our enhanced housing options interviews and looked at how we could change that and how we could become more trauma informed with working with women who have gone through domestic abuse and sexual abuse, and making sure that when we were dealing with these individuals that we were making sure that we covered all of the bases correctly and was giving them all the information that they required to go forward and sustain and support them in new tenancies, or to help them stay in their own tenancies if we are able to remove the perpetrator. The legal issues and the perpetrator task group is quite a difficult one, but the project has been working with Chartered Institute of Housing and Scottish Women's Aid with regards to the new law changes coming through and how we feel this would help landlords to remove perpetrators and rehouse them and leave the women and children within the homes. Our housing options is obviously making sure that any service delivery that our tasking groups are giving to people is informative and covers all bases. We could have the next slide, please. So our key principle of the project is to be person-centered approach. Listen to the women, listen to the people who are going through this. In the past, housing had been known to remove a lady from a situation, put her very far from her support network, thinking that we were doing the right thing and realizing that we were actually taking that lady from somewhere where she may have support and putting her somewhere where she doesn't know. So that was a big part of the project, was to actually listen to people who are actually going through this trauma and ask them what they want. Very much driven by choice. We ask the women what they are looking for, and if we can help to help them to achieve what they are looking for, then that's what the project is very much about. A very much supportive environment. All of our staff are there to support each other, and we talk to each other. We support everybody with regards to mental health workplace, and anybody who has had a traumatic interview with a lady can certainly come and get support from the staff. Promoting partnership working. This was a big part of the project because we felt that Fife Council needed to work more hand in hand with all RSLs within Fife, and we felt that some of the social landlords needed to take more control of their own tenants as well, but with the support of Fife Council at the back of them. The partnership working has been excellent. We do early intervention meetings, which means that if a lady who is in a traumatic household who's maybe going through domestic abuse and not sure what to do, if social worker involved, we will have early intervention meetings, and we will all sit round a table and we'll ask the lady what she's looking for, and we will all try and support in getting that lady's choices and avenues opened up for her. We found this very worthwhile because it sometimes stops it going as far as MANIC, which is the major multi-agency network, where by the time it gets MANIC, it's quite difficult for women. We ensure that all avenues that are discussed are looked at, and we offer support on referrals. We do regular feedback to the service users, and we do quality feedback questionnaires to service users as well. So any service users that we may have helped, we will ask them to do feedback forms for us, which is really interesting to get their feedback to make sure that we are covering everything that they want. Next slide, please. The challenges that we have, obviously choice. We'd love to give everybody a house with a front and back door, but our housing stock can be very challenging. But we will support the women if they wish to try and stay in their homes, and if that's what they want, if we can do this by working alongside the perpetrator and try and encourage them to give up their tenancy, then that is what we will do. We will ensure that there's a safe environment for all women, and we use a company called Safe, Secure and Supported at Home. So they'll go out and they'll do a safety plan with the lady. We work closely with Fife Women's Aid Advocacy, and the Law Centre and CARF. So we would be ensuring that if we were supporting this lady, we were making sure that all her benefits are in place. If there was any legal issues that she needed to talk about, we would then get an independent advice from Fife Law Centre. We worked with perpetrators and encouraged them for the best outcome of the children and the mother involved. Not always will they move, but if we can encourage that, then we will move, and we will support them to have their tenancies as well, so that they're not having to go back to the women, and encourage the women to go forward. Looking at changes regarding allocation policies and how the domestic abuse tenants sometimes get lost in our processes. So that was quite a challenge. So it's having to look at new ways. So like management moves, management points. Good communication between the case manager. We found from the very beginning, similar to what some of our colleagues have already mentioned, that women felt they had to tell their story several times. We felt that we needed to have one person case managing from start to finish, so that that lady is not having to go and repeat her story several times. So have the next slide, please. So the next step of the project is looking at our allocations policy, as I said, because sometimes women who are suffering domestic abuse slide through the cracks. We looking at rapid rehousing transition plan. From the rapid rehousing transmission plan, we have a prevention of homelessness fund. Now, this fund we can use for a variety of different things. So what we found is that women who are leaving a domestic abuse relationship sometimes just leave with the clothes that they have on their back, because they have nowhere else to put furniture or children's clothing or children's bedding or children's beds or their own sofas. So we use this money in supporting women to store items if they're going into women's aid accommodation, or if they're going to stay with family, or if they may have to go into homeless accommodation on a short-term basis. We also help with removals of items for women. We help put in carpets and white goods and furniture as soon as a lady has been given a tenancy, so that she's not having to wait on the Scottish welfare. As we know, it can take a wee bit longer. So we'll put in emergency large items so that we could get that lady in. And these are usually all put in before the woman actually moves in. So there's very little disruption for the lady and her children. Moving perpetrators, as I say, it's something that's going to be very much involved, hopefully, with the new laws, that we will have more legal rights to remove perpetrators from joint tenancies, and obviously we will support the perpetrators in getting housed so that they don't have to go back to disrupt the women in their homes. Support measures, we feel that it's very important for our staff. Once a case manager has finished it, they go on to the housing management officer, and the housing management officer will work with that tenant for as long as they may need them to, ensuring that they've got their benefits in place, ensuring that they feel safe, ensuring that any referrals to safe, secure and supported at home or Fife Law Centre are picked up and are kept going for the lady for as long as she needs that support to sustain her tenancy. Legal changes, obviously, we're waiting to see what happens with that, but we're quite keen to see how the Scottish Government's going to do that. If you go on to the next slide, please. This is feedback from a service user regarding how the Prevention of Homelessness Fund helped them. So if you'd just like to play the audio, please.
Hi, I'm a service user with Women's Aid. I was in refuge with Women's Aid for quite some time, and because of that, I had to give up all of my possessions. And then I was offered a permanent flat. Because we were in lockdown at the time, it was during the first lockdown, I was going to have to wait quite a long time for the welfare fund to help me out. And I've got 4 children who stay overnight, so I got given some things from the council. I was given 2 single beds with a single bed with a mattress, bunk beds with mattresses, double bed, fridge freezer, washing machine, and sofas in the living room, and they were all actually put down before I moved in. So the day that I moved in, everything was in there, everything was built up, and it was perfect. Really, it was a real weight off my mind because I was able to have the kids there. It was an absolute brilliant help. I couldn't have been without it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We just have the last slide, please. Yeah, so I've probably run through that, but I know that we were running out of time. So hopefully I'm there to answer any questions that anyone may have, and you have all my details there. Thank you very much for listening.